Okay, I guess it's just we three. I don't know if anyone else intends to come, but might as well get started. So my thoughts here about this is that we would have a discussion about AI as a metacognitive coach. This is a practical, very practical subject with a little bit of theory to kind of situate it. But as you see in the title, designing thinking loops that build reflection and integrity, my thought is that instead of using AI as an answer generator, that what we would be doing is using it for cognitive mentorship. This idea of purposeful pathways inspired me to think that we can get students to think about their own thinking, and that this would be the integrity in design, and that they begin to think of it as a way to query about their own rational structures, their own assumptions, their premises, their definitions. So it's a very straightforward, repeatable, adaptable, and portable model. And what we're doing here is operationalizing the basic structure of metacognitive coaching, or metacognitive theory, I should say. Plan, self-explain, revise is a simple three-step process by which we think about our own thinking. So that in the planning phase, we're planning strategies for learning. In self-explain, we're questioning our rationality and our reason. And in revise, we are simply then asking probing questions about probing questions about our reasoning, so that, again, in self-explain, we're asking about the structure of the reasoning. In revise, these probing questions about the reasoning would reveal where context would change our reasoning or keep our reasoning the same. Right? We reason about a solution, and then contextual issues change. Is our reasoning invariant? Where is it invariant despite changes? This is what I mean by witnessing and analyzing their thinking. So this foregrounds making reasoning observable. It builds ownership, learner ownership, because the learner is teasing apart their own arguments, their own thoughts. It encourages reflection because it is by design a reflective process where they think about their others' ideas and their own. Strengthening integrity by design simply in that the very definition of AI is being revised in some sense, or perhaps I should say, it's more like we're looking at another aspect of AI's definition. I suppose before going forward too far with that, I should say that what I mean is we often think of AI as a task-based tool. It's been created to complete tasks quickly. But I think that we can also look at AI as a method of, or a tool for questioning our own thinking. That's what it does. It analyzes our thinking. It analyzes the product of our thinking and thereby looks at our rational process. If it analyzes culture, analyzes language, analyzes society, it's analyzing the products of our mind and therefore our reasoning process. So just to quickly situate this idea in theory, we would first say that the first part, the planning part, which you'll see shortly, is where we activate prior knowledge as per cognitivism, right? So that the person can connect whatever the topic is to existing knowledge. A constructivist approach for the second, right? Learning through restructuring. Restructuring what? Their queries, their questions, their thoughts. The metacognition part is the thinking about thinking. And this can be, because it's a reflective process, I often think of it as potentially confusing, like a hall of mirrors. Right? Thinking about thinking, right? It can feel quite ungrounded. But through this process, we make it very grounded. And self-regulation, what is that? Well, what the learner is experiencing through this process is what it really means to work with ideas as tools. That simply positing something is not enough. That what we're doing is questioning our assumptions and our reasoning when we posit something. The straightforward guardrails are that we ask the learner to write first and use the AI for feedback and not for answer generation, and reflect on every suggestion made by the AI. So to kind of explain this through example first, I posed a question, and this is what I would put into the AI, right? Is it possible to use AI with honesty and integrity in an educational system that relies on a hierarchical structure of grading? So what I'm referring to here, right, is that students and learners are kind of, they're afraid of being pigeonholed and judged and labeled. So this causes, fear of testing, assessments, and categorization. So as long as we have hierarchical grading, how can we get them to use AI in a way that we wouldn't call cheating? How do we keep them from using it just to generate answers? Well, I believe that it's in this loop. And again, helping redefine or look at another definition of AI as there to help us analyze our own thinking and thereby think more clearly and powerfully. So when I put this question in, I put it in with a prompt. Before starting, help me outline my intended focus and predict what might make this question unclear or biased. Now, before I click and enter my original question with this prompt, I would write out what I predict the AI will say. So immediately I begin reflecting, thinking about thinking. The learner gets to immediately question what their assumptions are. And in this case, I'm making some assumptions about hierarchical grading as being, well, potentially unfair. After all, we're comparing students who may have nothing in common. And so this vertical, I'll call it vertical method of grading, may absolutely push them to feel they have to find an answer generating machine like AI. After it gives me an answer, right, and I compare it to my prediction, then my second in the explain phase, explain my reasoning behind this framing, what alternatives might exist. Now it starts to get a little more powerful. Right? The learner is directly questioning their own reasoning. Here it is, right? This kind of, we're teasing apart their thinking, their reasoning. And this is, again, a very practical way, I think, that would support very well a lot of the things I heard today about questioning, about writing prompts, and using AI to help people perform tasks, learn better, and think better. Now again, before I enter this prompt, I predict, well, what is it about my reasoning? You know, what might the AI say about my reasoning? And then I enter it. Now the third, most powerful question, most powerful prompt. Please ask me 2 to 3 probing questions that test my reasoning. Don't give me an answer. Ask questions that help me clarify my reasoning while keeping my original focus intact. The first part really does force the learner, when they get their feedback, it forces the learner to see a simple fact about a query, and that is, when you ask a question, you have to take a position. And when you take a position, there's a lot you have to ignore, right? You have to take a framework, a lens, however you want to phrase that, and see the world through it, define it this way. In my case, I was defining the world as, as the world of education as one of hierarchical grading. Of course, that's not true everywhere, is it? There isn't always hierarchical grading. But in order to ask a question, I took a position. And that helps to reveal that. And the second is really a guardrail, because the AI will tend to push, I've noticed, will push the question to another area. It'll begin to, I suppose, obviously based on its training data, push into another area and say, well, instead of asking that question, perhaps you should ask a more pointed question. So this guardrail helps to keep it on focus, on point. Now, I don't know if any of you would like to try that, but that's how I set it up, is for you to enter it into ChatGPT and give it a try yourselves. However, if not, we can just say that, right? At the end of this, you ask yourself this question: what shifted in your thinking, your clarity, your focus, or the way you're framing the question? So, on one level, we're talking about the thinking, right? The clarity and the focus, right? The clarity is the strength, right, of the vision, the direction of the vision and the focus, and framing the question, right? Now it's a linguistic issue, right? What's a better way of wording a question? So we get several levels of improvement by asking these questions, where we're asking about assumptions and biases, we're asking about logic and reason, and then the probing questions, which is really a Socratic approach, is where we're getting them to ask, what if the context changed? Would your question still hold? Would your reasoning still be valid? So that's essentially the approach. So if anybody is entering it, are you entering it? You're going to give it a try? Yeah, ask your question first, right? Whatever that may be. Hopefully, I think it's more powerful if it's something you particularly have an interest in, Again, and then when you enter the question, you then enter the prompt. I think that if we want to get learners to think more efficiently and to use ideas as tools, really, and understand them as tools, we can begin with this sort of automated cognitive mentorship, as a tool for better thinking, better inquiring into the world, greater clarity of thought, and also some level of creativity to help them get started in their writing, their research, you know. In that earlier session, we saw, I remember she said that some people hand in papers where, and these are professionals, she's teaching adult learners, they're handing in papers, right, with, that are all citations. And I thought, well, you know, if the paper is completely citations, this is a sort of insecurity. This is an affect issue. It's an insecurity about their own writing and their own ability to generate ideas. So how do we help them with that, you know? Well, we help them with fundamentals. We start with, what are your definitions? What are your premises? Well, and if we ask them what their premises are, first, definitions helps with clarity. Then we ask these learners, what are your premises? This gives them an opportunity to get creative about ideas, right? And have a logical starting point. So, all right, so you enter that, then you kind of ask yourself a question, like you try to predict what its answer will be. And then you click it, it goes through, and you compare what you thought it might be to what you get. And then you do the same with this next level. Right. Again, we've turned the theory of metacognition, of looking at thinking, into a series of steps. We've operationalized it. I've always found it interesting that the idea of reflection is also an important concept with light and sound, right? When light is reflected, what the reflected light has a different quality. Some, it might change color because some bands are absorbed, others are not. It's the same with sound reflection. It reflects off of a surface, and it comes back perhaps a little weaker and with a different frequency makeup, right? If it hits a wall that absorbs high frequencies, it bounces back with fewer high frequencies. It's altered after reflection is the point. And I think it's a similar idea, powerful idea with reflection and thought. You reflect, and there's a change.
I put a question in, a silly question, gave me like answers. And I put in the second one, like the second one, the one behind this one. What's the first one? Yeah, before starting, help me outline my focus. So I put that in, and it immediately gives me like, check the definitions, a totally different type of answer. It didn't give me answers, but it gave me reflection points.
Okay, excellent.
That was a silly question, but it really changed its answer right away. It gave me different things.
Right.
And without a second prompt, without more input, the second one, like outline my framing, sounds a lot like, the report was a lot like the second version, which was more targeted on not just giving answers, but it was like more analytical of where I'm coming from. So it works.
Okay.
It gives me a different answer. And if I keep going with that, I'm going to get different kinds of work. So when I entered it again, it kept the focus and it didn't go somewhere else and tell me.
It kept the focus. Excellent.
It stayed there and gave me more details about the process.
Excellent.
That
Excellent.
Here's answers. You can go here for that, and you can go there and go to this website and click on that. It gave me like an interesting feedback.
Okay. Right. It expands your view of the topic, whatever it is, right? Yeah. Right. So this gives, you know, a wide field for any learner to draw from if they're researching, right? It's like a dendritic relationship, right? They can just reach out to and ask more questions, deeper questions as well. So we're not asking it to generate ideas outside of the learner's mind. We're using the learner's question, your own question, right? And then gave birth to this. And then the third, again, is the most potent, I think, in some ways, or a deeper level. If you can only ask, you know, if you could only ask two of the three, I would say this second reasoning and the third, kind of a Socratic question, right? And then you'll see that there's an additional, right? It gives you several points, right? When it gives you several points based on your question, now you begin to see categories of answer. And if you do enough of this, you'll build a database of your own reasoning. The learner builds a database of their own reasoning and categories of evaluation. What do I mean by that? With regard to my question, right, is it possible to use AI on ST, right? With regard to that question, in the revised phase, it gave me these following questions back. How are you defining hierarchical grading in this context? So there it is. The first one is definitional. That's one category. Which parts of the grading system create tension in AI use? Well, if it's asking me which parts of the grading system create tension in AI use, it's talking about interaction. That's system design, right? So first, definition. The first thing it gives me is definitional. The second is system design. The third, what assumptions are you making about how grading shapes student behavior? Well, that's social or psychological. If you do this enough with your own reasoning, you'll begin to get all of these categories that it's using to evaluate you. And now you can use those categories when you're formulating arguments or creating research questions. Okay? What is the social aspect? What are my definitions? What is the, what is the system design aspect? And so forth, the cultural, socio-psychological. This gives you categories of evaluation for arguments and research questions. This is a very powerful technique. And there it is again. Now, of course, you don't need AI to do this. It's just faster and more powerful. You can do this with your students manually. And of course, these are the kinds of things that, if you're using AI, when you're using AI, you would ask that this itself is a kind of meta questioning. Right. And many of these questions I've seen today in the other sessions, right? How might this fit into your teaching context? Because we're always challenged with new approaches to bring that sort of aha moment about, right? And to help people stay encouraged on their learning path. Well, this is an excellent addition. I think the where did it oversimplify is important. Firstly, because oversimplification is a problem in general with when we take complex issues and statements, and in the attempt to understand them, we might oversimplify without acknowledging it. In other words, okay, so we may have to go through a phase of oversimplification, but we have to acknowledge that we're doing it and then move on to the next phase as we tease apart a complex issue. Well, certainly we can expect this to happen with the AI. Very potent. Where did it clarify your reasoning? Well, there are always assumptions. When you ask a learner to answer a question, they have to choose. They have to choose and deal with their own uncertainty, right? Whenever we answer a question, there are massive areas of vagueness. We have to ignore the vagaries and answer the question. We make a choice very often, unless it's a highly factual answer where there is no. But there is a choice to be made about how to answer a question, or the content, or both. That process can be revealed or foregrounded using AI. When we talk about clarifying reasoning, we're saying, well, not only logic, but also the kinds of choices you're making and, of course, assumptions. And this, again, the concept of activating different kinds of cognition, the cognition of making a choice and taking a stance, of logical reasoning and structured thought, of reflection, where thinking about it might change some aspects of a thought or question, research question or something. and of course, revision, which is, by the way, I think any kind of revision, we're using any kind of tool, is a kind of distributed cognition, right? When you write something out, you're distributing cognition. And it helps make it more, helps make it clearer for you, but you also don't have to remember as much because it's written. This is how you distribute your cognition, whether you're typing or writing, right? It's a thinking tool. And this is what I mentioned before, systematic ways to observe and nurture reasoning and categories of evaluation that will arise from this. So here it is again. If we're going to talk about integrity in design, we're talking about starting with human reasoning. That is the primary. It is to assist human reasoning, thinking, creativity, awareness, structure reflection. If you structure reflection, you have some concept of what its effect will be, and you get to exercise it. That's when you try to predict what the AI will tell you. You're exercising reflection. Right? And always question your results. Right? So it's again, we're teaching learners not to use it as just an engine to be trusted, and maybe more importantly, to just think of it as superior. Thinking of it as superior to ourselves in every way, and we have to kind of, give ourselves up to it. And so if you have any questions or thoughts about this?
I never thought to ask AI to ask me questions about my own questioning and thinking. I just ask it stuff. I don't want it to give me answers like everybody else.
Right.
You go, hey, just give me stuff. Just give me stuff.
Right. And it's in that.
Just have a deeper conversation. I don't think of it that way.
Right.
But it can if you ask it to.
Right, and it's in the partly. I think that's partly in the definition of AI that we subscribe to. As maybe as we subscribe to it as some superior thinker, and only that it's superior in every way, and that it can just generate what we need because it has all this training data from the internet. And we're not trusting our own thought and saying, well, it exists. Why? It's not simply a tool, right? Like a hammer or computer. It's reflection of consciousness. And what does consciousness do? It evaluates, it analyzes. So it exists partly to analyze and evaluate us. So if we use it that way, it becomes a learning tool, if any kind of tool at all. It's not a simplistic tool, I should say. But it becomes a way for us to develop ourselves further, yeah. So I think that's the issue, is like, the assumption or bias that we're given is it's superior. Just ask it questions. It does stuff you can never do. So, yes?
So, I think I'm not a believer yet, but I'm really stumbling on the limits and dangers of it.
Yeah.
So, for example, have you found it prone to hallucination in this process? And I'm thinking too about that young man who committed suicide after this kind of process with ChatGPT, and the program essentially encouraged him to take
Right.
his own life.
Right, well, yeah, I do remember reading about that, some of that, and he was kind of using it to just generate answers. He was asking it, where are you? And it was telling him something like it was in some spiritual space. He was just asking for answers. He wasn't asking.
He said things from some of the screenshots released from his phone. I think his parents had launched a civil lawsuit now against
Yes, I remember. Yeah,
Like, he was looking for guidance
yeah. Right.
about what he should do.
Hmm.
And so I worry about some of the information that's being fed into AI systems that comes from maybe one cultural perspective or adopt, like, suppose it said, like, in Japanese culture, kamikaze pilots, like they venerate
Right,
suicide and that kind of thing.
right,
So it would be, I mean, a lot of this sounds like what the teacher would do.
yeah.
So there would have to be some really, like, careful monitoring and ways of doing stuff.
Well, in this process, in each one of these questions, each one of these prompts, we're not asking the AI to give us answers to questions about life or give us solutions to our problems. We're asking the AI to help us ask questions about our reasoning, the validity of, like the validity of well, not asking it for the validity. We're asking it about our reasoning, and then we judge the validity. You see? Yeah, so we're not asking it for answers about any material subject. What should I do? Who am I? Where are you? What's the right way to do things? That's not it. What's the right way to live? Should I, commit suicide? Nothing like this. Instead, what you're doing is metacognitive questioning. Whenever you make a statement, you're making assumptions. So this first one is, well, what's the assumption? Tell me what my assumptions are. Can you reveal my assumptions, Outline my focus and predict what might make this question unclear or biased. You're right, it might reveal cultural bias. It might tell you something that but you're talking about statements, the nature of statements and questions. No material activity, nothing about how to live, how to die, how to treat other people.
But it goes deeper, like if you're
Right.
asking it to tell you like to reveal bias,
Yeah,
we know that AI too has its own biases, right? And
right,
it makes
right,
assumptions based on the information and
Right.
data that it's fed. So
Mm.
it omits a whole body of knowledge,
Mm.
like from indigenous cultures and
Mhm.
people who don't even have computers and so on. So
Right.
I still think I'll have to think about this more. But I just
Please try it. That's all I can say is try it. You'll see that you have any queries and you ask it to check your query and the structure of your query and the assumptions behind the query. Okay.
Is there a different example? Like, if I'm a student, I'm a college student, and like, what kind of question would I have where I can use this process? If I have to write a paper on the origins of, I don't know, the rock people,
Right.
like, if I'm doing research, can I use this process to still do work? Like, if I need to write a paper and I want AI to help give me ideas of where to go or something, can this process help me with that? If I'm looking to complete work product, I don't want to cheat, I don't want it to do it for me. I want to, further my cognition and do a better job, but I'm in a hurry, so
Right.
I need a buddy to help me. So I'm going to use AI. Can I still use it to put together a work product of that kind of thing? Or
Put together a work product.
if I had to write a paper and I want to use AI, can this process help me?
Well, certainly. I'll tell you why. That sort of arborite, right? Arborite shape that you're going to get from your answers from after your prompt is going to lead you to more questions to ask, right? Or new ways to approach your question. As it did in my sample question, it immediately said, well, there are other ways to, to approach your question because of the assumptions you're making. Perhaps you should ask it differently, It asked me how I'm defining hierarchical grading. It's asked me what parts of the grading system do I think create tension? Well, right. So now that's right another branch in the tree. That's
Those answers that's a reflection, that those answers will give you more information.
right. Or areas of inquiry, right? To then gain more information. Oh, let me go down this path. It gives you paths, right?
A giant load of
Right.
information now.
You're right. It broadens your field of questioning. That's it. Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's,
Right. You start with one question and you'll end up with dozens.
ask for the thing, it's gonna give you that.
Right.
But if I ask it for
Right.
better reasoning,
Right.
to judge which answers are correct.
You can judge which ones, yeah, which paths you wish to go down. And this, by the way, is why that second part of the third question is important. Right? Help me clarify my reasoning while keeping my original focus intact. Keep it from drifting. Keep it from the dangers of hallucination or pushing you in a direction. You want to stay in control of it, right?
That's the tool, that's how you
Right.
keep telling the AI to stay on the focus.
On-
answering your
Right,
needs.
right. So it'll take linguistic pathways away. It'll tell you to start asking questions. Well, maybe you shouldn't ask that question. You know, it'll start telling you that, right? It'll start taking the lead. And you never want that.
If I keep asking, it'll just kill someone.
Right, right,
Show me this, show me that, okay, here, I came up with something, here you go.
right. Yeah, that's it. So, that's basically the, right, that's basically the approach, is a way to ask questions, to get the AI to ask questions about your questions. That's it. It doesn't, and not have it tell you in which direction to go. Right. Any further comments, critiques, or queries?
Is this something like if you're a teacher and you have students and they're gonna treat you homework or trying to get away with it, is this something I could implement to help them use it more responsibly? Is that like more of an answer, like, well, if you help them use it more responsibly, they'll get better answers and do less cheating?
Right, exactly, right. The idea would be to get them to think of it differently, to think of a different definition of AI, that it's not just there to generate answers, but it's there, right, to help them think better about, in that instance, on their assignments. Think more thoroughly from different perspectives. That's what these do. You know, the answers that it generates from these prompts are perspectives. It generates different perspectives. Again, and I've tried this with students, when they use it, they're amazed at how it expands their vision of the problem, right? Whatever the problem is that they're trying to solve, you know, they find that it just gives them more ways to think about the problem, different perspectives, yeah, instead of using it as an answer generator to cheat.
Sounds like that's what everybody's afraid of.
Right. So, yes. Yes. Right. And so I'm an instructional designer. Yeah, I'm in corporate instructional design. And so I teach a range of things, from academic subjects to procedural things to physical skills and exercise, things like that. I'm sorry? Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm a course designer, and I came to it from a media background. I was an audio engineer and producer, so for a long time. So I produced the media, video, audio, things like that, voiceovers too, for a long time. So, yeah, I design the courses and create the assets. And so I found that even when teaching physical skills, this is useful. You know, when somebody's learning something, I don't know, maybe they're learning something about being a strength and conditioning coach, right? The CSCS course. If they're unclear about something, you know, I use this process now. I've started using this process using the AI. Say, okay, what questions do you have about this? well, I'm not sure about, this or that, I'm not sure about X, Y, Z, and I ask the question and see what assumptions you're making. Maybe you're assuming that you're wrong and you're not. Maybe you're assuming there's a problem and there isn't. Maybe, get new perspectives on the question. It really is helpful. So, I guess that's it. That's all I have.